Hello my lovelies, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, hi, my name is Mary and I give you an extra warm welcome. I would love it if you can click the subscribe button and stay for a while. I upload 3 times a week. Get ready with me, show my stash, trying on new makeup. If it's beauty or makeup related, I will be posting it. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. I appreciate you more than you know. So as you can tell from the title of the video, today we're going to talk about Hourglass. They are the star of the show today. Now, as you all know, every year they have a holiday release, and they lately have been giving us about 3 palettes to choose from. I decided to skip on the palettes. I'll tell you why here in a minute, but instead I pulled out my Hourglass palettes that I already own in my collection, and that's what I'll use for today's video and just finish getting ready with you all. If that sounds like a video you would like to see, then just go ahead and keep on watching. All right, so I have these 3. I'm pretty sure this is all I have. Look, if I can't even remember how many I have, I don't need another one, right? And then I also have this trio one, but let me pull my hair back. Okay, so let's talk just a tiny bit about these new face palettes. So 3 different colorways, and it looks like they provided one for the fair to light people, one for the light medium, maybe medium, and then a 3rd one which is a tiny bit deeper for the tan to deep complexions. Now, in order for me to know if the deepest palette will actually work on tan to deep complexions, I'll need to go watch some reviews of beauty content creators that are part of the tan to deep complexions. I feel like Hourglass, when it comes to these 6 pan face palettes, I don't feel like if there is a bronzer, it usually is deep enough. Not as deep as the trio they give us one year. That's just my opinion. As you could see, most of my face is on, well, base products mostly. So I used the Dior foundation stick, the new Westman Atelier concealer. That review should be up before this video. For cream products, I went into the Tarte Man-Eater cream bronzer, and then I did go into a tiny bit of the Hourglass liquid blush. Powdered with Makeup Forever pressed powder and the RMS loose powder for the rest of my face. And I just gotta apply all of my powder products. So let's get started. Okay, for today's video, for bronzer, I am going to use this palette, which is the Bronze and Highlight Lighting Edit Ambient palette. This one came out a couple of months ago. They did one that was just bronzers, highlighters, and finishing powders, and another one that was blushes, finishing powders, and highlighters. I don't own too many different shades of bronzers from Hourglass, so that's why I went for this one, and I actually do really enjoy this palette. So this is what we'll use for the powder bronzer. I have done plenty of Hourglass videos, so you either know which ones I own or I don't. I did purchase the Tiger palette, and this is meant for deeper skin tones when this release came, which I think was 2 years ago. This is a strobe or like a finishing powder, but I use it as a bronzer. It's a tiny bit warm, so I think we're gonna skip on that for today as a bronzer. But as you can see, it has a decent amount of pigment. Might pull this out for the blushes because I do really enjoy the blushes in this one. Then last year's palette, the Lighting Edit Unlocked. This one, I can't remember what. I'm pretty sure it's the darkest palette that they came out with last year. I just chose the Owl. And this one does have, I think, a bronzer. Yeah, the Solar Bronze, which is this one. And again, it's pretty warm. It's like a pretty warm bronzer. So I might add a tiny bit of this bronzer, we'll see. The 2 bronzers in this one I feel are a little bit more on maybe the neutral side, not as like orangey warm as those. I'm swatching this one here. And I feel like a common theme I've been seeing for the new reviews of these new palettes from Hourglass is that the bronzers are a tiny bit more cool tone and not as warm as we're used to getting from Hourglass. Let me swatch it here. I swatched the other this one here. So they did change it up. This one I feel is like more neutral, and this one's definitely a tiny bit more warm, but you see how this one looks like it has a little bit of red, and this one as well as like a red orange. Okay. All right, so powder bronzer. I'm just gonna dip into both of the bronzers in this palette, and this is the Wayne Goss F1. So I have seen a couple of reviews. Some of my favorite makeup content creators ended up purchasing all three of them. Even though I'm not purchasing these palettes, I still watched their reviews because I enjoy watching their videos. This is like one of my favorite brushes for bronzer, the Wayne Goss brush. It's so good. But do you see that? Do you see how pretty these powders are? I mean, Hourglass is popular for a reason, especially when it comes to their powders. But I do feel like when it comes to these powders, if you own one palette, I think you're okay. I think you can skip. I feel like the tones just haven't changed. And if I were to wear one palette on this side and the other on this side, I feel like they would look very similar to each other, just because the tones end up looking the same once they are on the face. So I feel like that's why I decided just to skip. I was fine. Even though there is new shades, I felt like the undertones weren't that different from what I already have in my collection, and I was gonna end up feeling like I got the same thing again, because these two, even though they are different, they end up looking pretty similar on my skin once I apply them. Okay, I am going to add just a tiny bit of this bronzer from my Owl palette. This is the TF2. Gosh, what was it? The snake? Whoa, really picked a pick me. I can't remember what the corresponding corresponding artwork was for the palette I chose. Oh my gosh, this is really pigmented. Okay. See how it now looks a little bit more on the reddish orange side? I'm glad from the reviews that I have seen that the bronzers in these palettes are a tiny bit more neutral or cool tone and don't have this like reddish orange undertones to them, because I feel like that's all we've been getting from Hourglass. I mean, is it pretty? Yes, it is pretty, but you don't always want to, at least I don't wear year-round super orange warm bronzers like this. Not year-round, more during summer than anything. Okay, now we're gonna jump into some blushes, but let me show you what I mean. The tones just look the same. So I'm gonna jump into this palette, and like I mentioned, this is for like darker complexions. There's 3 blushes in this palette here, but these two, the undertone I feel are just way too similar. I've always said that swatches don't tell the full story, especially when it comes to blushes. So this is the top one. Okay, sorry, I had to clean my hand real quick. Okay, so this is the top blush, and then this is the one right underneath it. So swatch wise, yes, these two look different, but once you actually apply them to the cheek and blend them out, they're not gonna look that much different, honestly. And I might do it just to prove my point. Okay, now the one in the corner, which looks like it's pretty metallic. This one's more of an orangey tone. Okay, now let's go into the Tiger palette. This one has only 2 blushes. So I'm pretty sure it's these 2, but I use this as a blush topper. So let's just swatch them. Okay, so here is the orange one, and I'll swatch that right under this metallic one. So other than this being metallic, it's like almost the exact same tone. And then the one underneath that, it looks very similar to this one and a tiny bit to that one. See what I mean? Let me swatch that metallic one, which is probably a highlighter. Deeper skin tones. This one's probably going to be the most different out of all of them, maybe. No, see, it almost pulls the same as this metallic orange one. So this is supposed to be two different palettes, and I feel like all of these tones look similar and all of these tones look similar. So me personally, I feel like they're just changing the tones slightly and then calling them new shades. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. Because in swatches, they can look different, but once you have them on the cheek, that's when it's like really telling you the true story. Okay, so I'm gonna jump into this palette first, and I'm going to use this top one right here. This is the Sonia GTF3. So I'm using the top one. Really picked up pigment, and it's gonna go right up here. This is meant for darker skin tones, so I do have to tread softly or it can really get out of hand. Okay, beautiful tone. Okay, now I'm gonna pick up my Sonia G Classic Cheek, and I'm gonna jump in to this one here, the one at the bottom. Really picked up pigment. Okay, now please tell me that they don't look very close to the same shade, right? I mean, it's a very slight difference. If you didn't just see me apply two different tones, you would probably think I have the same shade on both sides. Okay, now let's do the same on the apples of the cheek, the Tiger palette. And I'm going to use the little orangey shade. I went ahead and wiped my TF3. Whoa. This TF3 really picks up pigment. So I'm gonna apply that to this cheek. Okay, beautiful. I'm not gonna deny that they're not beautiful. They are very beautiful. Okay, and now this one here. Now this one is a tiny bit metallic, so I might add that topper from the other palette onto this cheek. So Classic Cheek, I did wipe it down. Okay, so this one I feel just have a little bit of pinky rosy in it, but let me add that topper to this one from the Tiger palette. This one here. Okay, now it's looking close to the same. Yeah. Close to the same, if you ask me. Let me just blend out the edges because it looks a little extreme. Okay, so you cannot sit there and deny that it doesn't look like I have the same shades on both sides. Not exactly the same, but pretty much the same. Okay, now when it comes to highlighters, I feel like a lot of highlighters look pretty much the same, especially if they have the same undertone. They look the same once you apply them on the cheek. It just depends whether it's a little bit more of a natural highlight or a metallic. I feel like the intensity is what you can usually tell the difference in a highlighter. For this palette, the two tones that I use as highlighters are these two, and as you could tell, this one's a little bit more metallic and this one's not as intense. So let me swatch both of these, and this is the Tiger palette. Okay, so this is the metallic one, and then this is the one that's a little bit more on the subtle side. Intense, not intense. Tone pretty much looks the same. Now for the bronzer and highlighter palette, there is two highlighters in here. One is a little bit more of a subtle highlight and then a true highlight. So let's do the subtle and the true highlight. So the subtle, I'm gonna put it right underneath this one. Okay, other than it being brighter, it looks similar. Maybe a little bit more on actual champagne versus like gold. Okay, other than this one standing out, this looks similar to these, right? And for this palette, and I think for this one, there's only one highlighter. This one here. This is a finishing powder. I'm pretty sure. I can double check. Yeah, finishing powder. Okay. Let me make sure I don't put it on top of the other. So the only one that looks a tiny bit different undertone wise is this one, but these and this one look the same. This one just looks really bright. So pretty much almost the same thing. Okay, now let's see if I can show you that they look pretty similar on the skin. So I'm going to pull the one from the Owl. It's the only highlighter. This is the MY3 from Danessa and My Kid Co. And I'm gonna apply that one over here on this side. Okay, pretty metallic. I prefer the more subtle formula for highlighters from Hourglass than the metallic. I mean, it's pretty, but not my favorite. Okay, wiping my brush. And now I'm gonna jump into the Tiger palette. And I'll use this one. It's a tiny bit too gold for my liking, but for the sake of this video, same brush. Like I said, I just wiped it down. Okay, so there is the highlighter from the Tiger. Okay, and then there is the highlighter from the Owl palette. I would say they look almost identical. Okay, and all of the soft light finishing powders I feel look pretty much the same, especially because of the way that I use them, which is just to kind of marry everything together, give it that soft blur effect. So I'm actually going to dip into both of the finishing powders in this palette. This is a Make Beauty fluffy brush, and I just use this to kind of provide a blurring kind of effect. This is one of the reasons why I fell in love with Hourglass. So you see this side and how it just looks blurred, almost like I have a filter, and then this side not so much. I hope you can see what I'm seeing. I mean, I've done this plenty of times on my channel, so if you know, you know. But this is one of the reasons why I fell in love with Hourglass powders. Probably why I have as many of these palettes as I do, although it's only 3 and then the trio. But honestly, I don't need any more. And I feel like the tones in the new ones look very similar to what I already have. So I felt like I could skip, even though, yes, technically there is 5 new shades in every single one of the palettes. If I were to put it next to these two, because I'm pretty sure the one that caught my attention the most is the one that has that red burgundy tone in it, but I feel like it would be very similar to these two. And I would just end up disappointed, like when I compare this one to this one, because as you could see, it's basically the same palette, just being called new, and there's another almost $100 that just kind of went down the drain. All right, my lovelies, that's going to be it for this video. I just curled my lashes. I did do my eyebrows. I just haven't set them quite yet. And I put the Refi Beauty, I think Guava is the shade. It's like a pretty light pinky gloss. I am going to film a reel. Today is Thursday, September the 5th, and we're gonna go watch Beetlejuice. So I have an idea for a reel. Hopefully I can get it done. So I'm just gonna leave the makeup here. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I don't want you all to feel like I am pushing you to keep purchasing new makeup. If you have something similar in your collection, do not feel pressure, especially from me, that you need to go buy anything new that I review. Yeah, for this time, I decided, you know what, you don't need to pick up any of the new Hourglass palettes, even though every single palette has 5 new shades. You probably have something very similar from the brand. and I feel like I do. So instead, I pulled out my 3 face palettes and used them. So I hope this helped you out in deciding whether you want to pick this up or not. And if you were on the fence and don't really have the money and kind of just felt pressured, I hope this kind of puts you a little bit at ease and letting you know, like, it's okay to skip. Don't let FOMO get to you. Sometimes it gets to me. This time, it's not. All right, my lovelies, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate every single one of you. You have no idea. All the comments, all the likes. If you use my links to shop, it truly all does mean the world to me. With that being said, do not forget to give the video a big thumbs up. And also don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And I will see you all on my next video. Bye.